The mind can ramble off in strange ways.
You're in for a real treat.
Introducing Punchlines
Podcast.
Your next comic has been on the Jay Leno Show, David Letterman. Please welcome the very funny Mitch Fatel.
Punchlines Podcast.
Oh, that guy's fucking hilarious.
Whatever the mind can conceive and believe, the mind can achieve.
Punchlines. All right, welcome to Punchlines Podcast with myself, Cory Sandhagen, Mitch Fatel, Mike number one, but still the
I
second.
like Mike number one, though.
The co-host to me. And then today we have Neil Magny. If you don't know who Neil Magny is, you probably haven't turned on your TV in a while.
Neil doesn't know to turn off his phone.
Yeah, that's how famous he is. His phone can't.
He's going to take a call in the middle of our podcast just to show
perhaps
us.
the UFC guy. No, I'm kidding. Of course, it would happen that easy.
Is it really the UFC?
No, I wish.
How you doing today, Neil?
Pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Good.
You
Nice.
saw my show. You're one of the first fighters. You remember seeing my show, right?
Yeah, I came to the show.
I'm assuming you're a little nervous talking to me now after seeing my show. And I was really, I don't know if you know, but it was a really big deal to me that you came.
Oh,
you
really?
probably because now that I know Cory, you probably forget that when someone's a fan of yours, that when they come to see you, it's like it's a different, like you're just a guy watching a show.
For sure.
But when you know someone, it's all of a sudden I was like, I even said to my, I was like, was Neil laughing? And Mike was like, yeah, I saw him laughing. This is important to me.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those things. Like for me, like I've had experiences where guys like literally shaking, like, "Oh my God, you're Neil Magny." I'm just like, "Yeah, dude, I'm just the guy."
Isn't that crazy?
Like, I don't take it like super personal. And then like I've run into guys like Peyton Manning, where it's just like, "Oh yeah, he's just a dude, just like anyone else." So, like I never really put too much emphasis on like what a person does or what they accomplish, opposed to actually who they actually are.
But saying that, is there anybody that you would meet now that you get really nervous if you met them?
I think it would actually be Steve Harvey and Will Smith, and like even like those guys.
Steve Harvey? I love Steve Harvey too. I love Family Feud, bro.
I can make that happen.
That's my go-to. Do you know Steve Harvey?
For the podcast, I do. But I don't know. I'm assuming. You know what I'm psyched about is I've been doing comedy long enough that people that I don't know me. And that's a cool feeling. Like, do you know who Russell Peters is? He's a really famous comedian.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
And I worked with him somewhere, and I was really psyched to meet him. And he's like, "Man, I'm a really big fan of yours." And I was like, "Wow, that's really." You never know who your fans are.
For sure.
Who's like a fan of yours that you never would have expected?
Dude, like, so I remember one fight. It was in Vegas, actually. I remember getting into the cage, pacing back and forth. And as I look up, I'm like, holy crap, that's Mike Tyson. And I look back at my coach like, hey, Mike Tyson's here to see me fight tonight. And I was just like super amped up. Like, all right, Neil, let's get back composure here. Like, focus, you have a fight tonight. But
wow.
Seeing Mike Tyson at one of my fights is probably like one of the most surreal things ever.
Whoa, that actually would be super cool.
Because that's an icon watching you.
Yeah, I mean, growing up in Brooklyn,
That's
like every
nuts.
kid knew who Mike Tyson was. Everyone loved Mike Tyson. Like, oh my God, this dude's so cool.
Yeah.
So to like get to where I was at 20 years later to have him sitting at one of my fights, it was like, it was surreal. It was freaking awesome.
And was it on your mind during the fight at all? Or
No, I mean, it's kind of weird with fights. Like, you have all these emotions going through your mind, but like once that first punch goes, you kind of forget about it. So like, I remember locking eyes and seeing him there, and I thought it was pretty cool. But once he got kicked across the head, I was like, all right, never mind. I'm here to fight. Let's make this thing happen.
Did you win that fight?
Yeah, I won and got a picture, so it was pretty cool.
I have two stories. One's a good one, one's a bad one. For me as a comedian, Rodney Dangerfield was my icon. And I was, that's a guy, Rodney Dangerfield, he's a comedian. I mean, that's a really famous guy. And I was performing in Vegas, and all of a sudden someone's like, Rodney wants to come back and say hi to you. And it's before the show. And I was like, what is he doing here? And they're like, he likes young comedians. He likes to come see them. And I was so in my head that I tanked the show so bad because I was so nervous about him liking me, which I was so stupid. And then on the other hand, I had Seinfeld at one of my shows, and I didn't know he was there. And when I came off, he was like, good stuff. And I was like, shit, it's my Mike Tyson. So, yeah. Cory, have you ever seen someone that was a fan of yours that you didn't know was a fan? Because you don't have too many fans, actually.
No, I actually don't have too many. The only time I think I get aware of that stuff is if like someone comments on like one of those Instagram pictures of like for example, Shane Burgos, I really like that guy. He's a 145er. He's kind of new to the UFC too, but
yeah.
I think so. Anyways, he commented on one of the pictures and was like, "Oh, really nice fight," and so did this guy Groovy Lando.
Lando Venata.
Yeah.
like
and he did too. And I was like, "Holy shit, I really like these guys' styles." And they're commenting saying that this is going to be a good fight. That was pretty cool. Yeah. But I get really flattered by like guys that actually know a lot about fighting, commenting and saying like, "Oh, I really like your style," versus like I feel like someone famous saying that, you know?
Yeah. Neil, you had your experience is probably totally different than Cory's because you got onto the Ultimate Fighter, which was that show's really not watched as much as it was back then. Everybody was watching it back then.
It's not even around anymore.
They totally got rid of it all.
Oh, did they really?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you were cast on that, and so first of all, I have a couple of questions. When you were cast on that, are you also cast on something like that for your personality as well? Are you supposed to like, okay, this guy will be someone in the house that...
So to be honest with you, I have no idea what the UFC looks for when they cast those guys. I literally tried out for that show 4 times before I finally made it. So
What? Really?
Yeah. So I tried out like the first time, like, all right, I'm gonna go in there and be all gimmicky, be super hyper, like try to be outspoken,
right.
and like, nah, none of the fights. You're not making the cut. I went back the second time, try to get on there, like, nah, you didn't make the cut. And then finally the 4th time, I was like, all right, dude, this is my 4th time here. You guys told me this, and that. I went ahead and did all those things. What do I have to do now? And they finally looked at each other. Was like, I guess you're right. And I was like, oh, really? That's all it took? I'm actually in the UFC or in the Ultimate Fighter now. I'm like, yeah, this is your shot. And I was like, holy crap, what do I actually do now? It was kind of cool to have that experience with like coming up short so many times and finally getting on there.
Is that kind of a common theme in your life, Neil? Because you're just like a tenacious guy, aren't you? Like, dude, we were playing spike ball after practice last week. Do you know what spike ball is?
No.
It's just this park game.
Sounds like dodgeball to me, which I'm...
It's like so there's 2 people on each team. I'll spare you the details, but... it's like a competitive, like we get really into it on the team because a lot of us are pretty good at it. Mm-hmm. And like this was Neil's first time playing and he was god awful. And like, and we only have 1 board of spike ball and like we had probably 4 or 5 people or 4 or 5 teams of people that wanted to play. And Neil wanted to play every single time because he was so bad at it and he wanted to get good at it.
Get better.
He's just like a tenacious guy. Like he just like literally, I mean, people say this very cliche, like, oh, he has no quit in him. But I really don't think that Neil has any quit in him.
Yeah. Which actually that's perfect lead into one of the things that I wanted to talk about, which is how I was a fan of yours. And I'm sure you've heard this 100 times at this point. It's got to be pretty cool to be associated with something pretty cool. But I think one of the love of sports in general is the comeback. And the reason why I think people love the comeback is because people always want to believe in themselves that like, okay, no matter what's happened to me, I can come back. And a lot of people just don't want to go through the hard part of comebacks. And so, of course, I wanted to bring up the Lombard fight, which is such a fight because that was a fight where you were basically dead. You're basically dead, right? And then all of a sudden, so I have so many questions about that fight. You're familiar with that fight, Cory? Hector Lombard and him in the first round, right? He basically almost knocked you out.
Yeah,
I do remember that. Yeah, I do remember that. I do remember
I
that.
was like struggling to find my feet underneath me, just literally just getting punched all over the place. Like, all right, just make it through these first 30 seconds, it'll be okay kind of thing. But that was a rough fight. Like, I honestly don't remember much of that. I say it's 30 seconds. It might have been longer, but it was a pretty intense fight to start out.
And that's what goes through your head.
That's what I wanted to know. Yeah.
Honestly, like I'm just like you're just gonna like black out. Not black out in the sense like you lose consciousness, but black out in the sense like you don't think about the next. You just kind of think like, all right, get back up, get back to this guy. Like it's almost like being in a movie and seeing yourself on the ground kind of thing. Like it's such a surreal feeling. Like being there, being knocked down, being dazed, and still thinking like I can still do this. I can still win this fight. I can still go out there and get this done.
Yeah.
So it's almost hard to explain. Like
but the focus is on like the next step. Like what do I need to do to make this happen?
For sure.
Is that where
you're not thinking about wow, that hurt, or even if it doesn't sound, you're just kind of like, all right, get back up, get back to find your composure kind of thing. But it was intense.
Because I had a similar experience after that Alcantara fight because Yeah, I mean, you don't really reflect on it unless people ask you. But like when people were asking me, like, "Oh, how'd you get out of the armbar? What were you thinking while you were in the armbar?" I was just like, "Get out of the armbar."
Yeah.
I don't know. It wasn't like this thought of like, "Oh, I'm fucked." It was more of this
Out
like,
of the armbar.
Yeah, it was like, "Well, get out of this," like, and I'm sure it was a similar thing to you.
Yeah, I mean,
right?
even at, you bringing up that experience, like I was at that fight watching your arm bend back and like, holy crap, he's not going to use that arm. And to watch you eventually make it out of that armbar and then beat him with the same arm that he damn near broke, like, dude, that was impressive. Like that's the kind of like mental will that you can't even train for. You just have to like be in a moment and just go with it. Like,
Right.
It's unreal.
Well, that's why, and when I was watching the Lombard fight, that's where I became a huge fan of yours, because like I said, everybody likes that. Everybody likes the guy who doesn't quit, because I think we all inside of us want to believe that we won't quit in those situations. And so, do you remember if there's ever a time, or maybe you're just a different kind of human being, where you go in your head like, okay, I'm probably not going to win this fight, so I'll just do the best I can and hope I get out of it? Or do you let those thoughts creep in?
So I'd be a liar if I said those thoughts don't creep in. Like I had experienced my last fight, actually. It was about a year ago now. Super early on in that fight, I got my eye was injured. I couldn't necessarily see out of my right eye during the fight. And it was one of those injuries where it was happening, and I can see that, like, or I can sense that it was there. There was no denying the fact that I couldn't see out my right eye. But somehow, just like, well, I'm still in the fight. I can't just quit now and go out from it. Like trying to find a way to fight back from that, it was super difficult. Like even going into like the 4th, 5th round of that fight, like my leg is all beat up. I still can't see out the right eye. I'm still like, all right, I'm not quitting yet. Like I'm still gonna go out there and try to win this fight some way, somehow. I don't know how it's gonna happen. I don't know how I'm gonna pull it off, but I'll be damned if I don't try to do it.
Right. Right. And have you also have you lost enough that you know that you can get through a loss so it's not as big a deal anymore?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, winning and losing is not a big deal. It's all about the effort that I put in. With almost 30 fights, I've lost one decision ever. And I made up my mind I would never lose another decision fight. Like in my mind, if I lost a decision, that means there's something that the other guy did to outwork me or outclass me, and I just can't take that. Like I can take a submission loss, a knockout loss, where I was at least trying to win and things happen. But to know that I could have done more in order to change the outcome, but I didn't, I just can't wear that anymore. So literally with over 30 fights, the one that haunts me most is the decision loss.
Whoa, that's a really powerful thing.
Yeah. Like it's the crazy thing about it. Like looking back on it, it's against a guy that I know I could beat, but for some reason you're kind of pacing, you're going through the motions, you're doing all this other stuff. But like that stings more than any other loss I've ever had.
So that kind of loss will hurt more than those other, like will you be able to walk away from a submission loss or something like that and actually wake up the next day happy? Or
I mean, you're not necessarily happy, but like there's something you walk away from there with. Like I remember my first loss in UFC ever. I got submitted by Mountain Triangle against a guy who's far better at jiu-jitsu than I was. I came back, I worked on it time and time again, and then a couple years later I'm facing a guy like Damian Maia, who's one of the best submission grapplers in MMA.
Right.
And he attempted that very same technique on me, but because I already suffered that defeat, already went through it, already learned from that mistake, whatever, Damian Maia wasn't able to pull that submission off on me in that fight. So for me, like those are the fights that you kind of like walk away learning something from, and you kind of feel better about at the end of the day. And so much so, we take a step further. After the Damian Maia fight, I was able to go back and actually finish a fight with the Mountain Triangle. So like it's almost like you're allowed to grow from those experiences, where if you just lose a decision, just like, no, you got outworked. Like that guy was willing to do more than you were in that fight, and it showed. So that's why it haunts me more, losing a decision compared to a submission or a knockout.
Right. And then the opposite of that, how good does it feel to win? Or do you let yourself even enjoy that? Or are you one of those guys that goes, okay, it's on to the next fight now? And
yeah, I mean, definitely does feel good to win, but I never had experience or a win yet where it's like, yeah, I'm on top of the world. This beat so-and-so. Just like, all right, when's the next fight going to come? Like I literally, I can't think of one fight where I like whether it was a knockout loss or something like that, where after it happens, you see me jump out to my feet like, yeah, knock the guy out. It's just kind of like a casual walk off, like, all right, well, this guy gets back to his feet and on to the next one. Like, for my mind, knowing that I can be a champion, knowing I can wear a UFC gold belt, that's the big thing for me. That's the moment I'll be jumping up, climbing the cage, doing all the other stuff. But to get a win or get a knockout, get one of those things, like, that's kind of supposed to happen. That's what you train for.
Right.
So I don't necessarily allow that thing to like define the moments of my career. When I look back at this at an 80-year-old man and I said like, that was a good moment, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But at the moment, I know what I'm shooting for, and the win over so and so isn't it that gold belt is.
Yeah.
Was it like that for you in any of your comedy stand-ups?
That's really weird because as you were talking, I dreamed my whole life of getting on the Letterman show. That was for me growing up. And then I did it. And I killed. And it lasted a couple hours. And I went home. And it was one of those things that you're almost like, why didn't I enjoy the process way more than the moment? Because the moment just came and went. I did good. I felt great about it. I have it for the rest. There's 2 moments in my career that stand out. The first moment was when I won an award. I won an award at the Aspen Comedy Festival for Best Comedian. That was a shocking feeling to me because I always knew I was good, but then to have other people actually notice that, because I think in a weird sort of way you think you're good, but you don't really deep inside know if you are.
Sure.
You're dealing with so much self-doubt. And I got the award, and I it's in my house now, and it's behind it just holds up a couple of books and stuff. It doesn't mean anything. I like to look at it every now and then, but it hasn't changed my life. And I think that's the scam of before you're successful in something, you have to realize that stuff's never going to make you happy. It's the whole, and the big regret I have is not enjoying coming up as much as I should have.
Yeah, I would say that like the highest highs and my lowest lows were probably in the amateur days. Like I probably got more excited about like my first couple of wins as an amateur, and definitely the most nervous is when I was an amateur too. So yeah, maybe you just get used to that feeling. I don't really know what that is.
Or you learn that feeling doesn't change who you are. Like you said, you said that and I've had that experience as well. And I've had, I remember I was this guy working as a waiter at Denny's, and girls wouldn't really go on dates with me when I was that. And then all of a sudden I was with I'd show up at shows and girls would have signs, hot girls would have signs. That was at the height of my success. And I remember like, oh, it's really cool. But then like realizing like, okay, I still kind of feel like I'm faking it, like, and it didn't change anything. And so looking back, I'm like, the amateur days or the days when I was an open mic, I was like, those were really the fun ones where I started, and I wish I enjoyed those more.
Do you have any hot girls holding up signs for you, Neil?
I'm a married man now.
I'll hold up a sign for you. I'll hold up a sign for you. And so there's just something you said I want to get back to. You said about when you're holding the belt. So having said that, have you said in your mind that if your career ends without having that belt, that your career would have been a failure? Or would you have, do you know what I'm saying? Like, because I think, honestly, if I had not gotten on the Letterman show, I would have spent my life thinking that I wasn't as good. And I got the show, and it didn't really change anything. But it's kind of scary to me that would have been my defining moment.
For sure. I mean, like, is this something that you train for, like you said, like something that you dream of when you're younger? You're like, man, I can make that happen. I can make that happen. So is it a little bit disappointing if it doesn't happen? Yeah, sure. But like at the end of the day, like you said earlier, it's about enjoying that process. I mean, the experiences I've had all around this world with the people I've had it with because of mixed martial arts, that's something that can never be taken away from me. I mean, if you go to my house right now, every fight poster, every fight glove, every fight shorts, it all sits in a box in the basement. Like,
I thought you had it out.
No, it's not out. It sits in a box in the basement.
Yeah, mine's in a box in the basement too.
Yeah,
I'll take both of you guys.
Like, all that stuff sits in a box in the basement for me. So like that, those material things, those tangible things, like the fight posters, the fight shorts, the belts, all those things, like they don't necessarily mean much, but the experience itself does. And if I were for some reason leave my career without getting that gold belt, the experience I've had along the way would be something I can not drawing a blank on a word here. That's something I can value forever. Like even if I don't experience that, the process and everything else I got along the way, that's something that's never gonna leave me.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's so out of our hands, and the story I always go to with that is that Charles Barkley is one of my favorite human beings in the entire world, and Charles Barkley never won a title, and that's the big thing on him, and I'm still like, but that was out of his hands. One guy can't win a title, and there's so many things out of our hands. Of like, I'm trying to sell a special now, and I don't, and I'm having trouble selling it. It's because the times have changed. The comedy's still the same, but I can't. And my wife is like, we don't have control over that. We have control over me sitting and writing my stuff, and like that's all you have the control over.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, like even this year, for example, show how much little control you have. I mean, I remember sitting in this very same room with 4 of my coaches at the beginning of the year, like, all right, guys, this is what we're going to do this year. I'm going to go 3-0. I'm going to get myself back in the top 5, and I'll be making a great run for 2020. Here I am in November. I haven't fought yet. You know what I mean? Like here's my plan. Here's my goal. Here's things like that. And life happened, and I haven't fought yet this year. So like all those goals, all those plans, all those things that I had set out for 2019, it's not going to happen. But like, am I supposed to say back and say 2019 is a failure? No. Like even though it was a down year for me in terms of fighting, it's been a great year in terms of experiences. I mean, my wife's pregnant. I got the great experiences with my teammates. Like it's been an amazing journey this year, even though the goals that I set out for didn't quite happen the way I thought they would.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool that Neil thinks like that? Because that's really genuine too. That's just not like like I'm an optimistic guy. Let me say some optimistic shit. Like
I like your impression of Neil Magny.
That was my impression of like an optimistic guy who's faking the optimistic view. Where like. Yeah, Neil really sees life like that, and I think that's really cool.
But I was gonna say also, me and you getting to know each other, I've noticed that you're not that guy that after your fights you start doing the belt thing, and I've asked you like, would you need to be the champion? You're like, I'll see if I can do it. Like, but it doesn't seem to be there's some people that just set that as that's got to be everything I am and everything and I think you don't talk like that, and as a result, I think that's one of the reasons you're getting so successful.
Yeah, I would say that. I think that it's like this push culturally or wherever it comes from that like we need to like have different accolades in order to prove to ourselves that we're worth a lick,
Yeah.
Which I don't see it like that. Like for me, and it kind of like changed and really resonated for me after I read John Wooden's book. But like his whole philosophy is just be the best that you can,
Right.
And that's gonna look differently for everyone. And like once I kind of like when I read that in John Wooden's book and that came from a really respectable source, I was like, oh, okay, like I can think like that too, and that's an okay thought. Because in the sport, especially in our sport, it's like even when you're an amateur, you have one thing in mind, and that's probably winning the UFC belt, and that's your goal,
right?
But that's
your Super Bowl. It's your Super Bowl, and it's your Letterman show.
Sure, and that's fair, but how unrealistic is that for 99.99% of those people that are saying that? Like the focus shouldn't be on gaining an accolade. The focus should just be on being the best that you can. And once I kind of started adopting that philosophy, I found that I try to be better in the gym. I try to like fight better guys. I don't want like an easy road to the top. Like I want to fight the best guys because the best guys are going to make me the best fighter that I can be. And if somewhere on that journey I cross paths with like an opportunity to get a belt, then cool. But I know that when I retire, I'm going to be the best fighter that I am humanly capable of being. So,
and you'll give me your box of posters and stuff. I can have it.
I don't. They might be worth a little bit more if I have a belt or not. But do we have to take a break?
Yeah, let's take a break. Yeah. I was going to say that. And we'll come. I promise. I'm looking at our time thing. Cory's very into the technical aspects of everything. So he's like, I think we should take a break right here. All right, let's take a break. We'll be right back with our guest, Neil Magny. And this is Punchlines Podcast.
It's a commercial break.
Yeah.
Yeah. For the sponsors that we don't have yet.
Which is one of the reasons we have you here. We'd like to know if you'd like to sponsor, because you have some cash now. All right. All right, we're back. Go ahead. No, go
for it.
No, go,
I
man.
We were still on break.
You want to do the intro? You do the intro.
You're so bad at this, bitch. You are so bad at this.
Do you want to know how bad we are at this? You got scammed by doing this with us, because I was just starting to edit our podcast, and our first podcast, we didn't even introduce the guest. We just started talking. He could just be a guy on the street, and we're like, yeah. So anyway, this is Punchlines Podcast. Our guest is Neil Magny. The number one thing I keep hearing about you constantly is everybody always says, nicest guy you've ever met, nicest guy in the gym. I personally don't see it, but this is what people are saying. So having said that, I want to know, are you, because I've heard that about myself, that I'm one of the nicest guys in comedy, but I think it's just because I want people to like me. Like, I just am really insecure, and I just want to be liked. It's really probably not real. But are you a happy guy, or is this a personality that you've always had since you were young, or where does that come from, and why are you known as that guy?
I think it's just who I am. I mean, I grew up with a real tight-knit family. I mean, I had 5 brothers, 1 sister growing up. So,
from Brooklyn, right?
Yeah, in Brooklyn, New York. So, like, we kind of had to be there for one another. So I just had this feeling where even if I don't have much, I can still give something to my brothers and people around me, sort of thing. So as I got older, as I got more, I just expanded that to, like, all right, well, distant relatives, okay, friends and people I see on a daily basis. All right, well, strangers now. That's just the way I view the world. I mean, I remember being as young as, I want to say 8, 9 years old, and one Christmas I remember getting $20 from my grandmother as a Christmas present, and rather than like, yeah, I'm gonna go buy a new toy, I took it to the grocery store, buy groceries for my brothers and I. Like, that's just kind of like,
wow.
That's just kind of what, like, the attitude you get with, like, not having much and having, like, a close-knit family that you grew up with. So now that I'm older, I kind of look at life the same way. Like, I know where my strength comes from. I know that I'll be okay no matter what happens to me, sort of thing. So I don't necessarily hold on to things or value things over people.
So was that, like, taught to you by your mom and dad, or is it like a culture? Because you're from?
Yeah, my mom's from Haiti. So,
Haiti, that's right.
It's like, no, I think it's literally something that just from growing up with, like, so many siblings, you just kind of get used to it. Like, I mean, like, when you have plenty of siblings and you don't have much, like, you learn how to be, 1, resourceful, 2, just kind of share everything you have. Like, at one point, me and 3 of my brothers were about the same size. So if we had a size 8 shoe in the house, it was for 4 people. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so, you just don't, like, hold on to, like money and possessions this certain way. You just kind of like, all right, if I have this, I'm blessed to have it, and I'll share it with people.
Right there, we're different, because if I had $20, my sister would starve before I share everything with my sister. So, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then coming up now, was fighting ever a realistic thought in your head of a way to make a living, or when did that happen?
So for me, the whole goal and the whole vision of fighting happened in my senior year of high school. It was like my sophomore year going into my senior year of high school. I kind of just walked into Miguel Torres' gym one summer, just kind of like, all right, and it wasn't even to practice martial arts that day. I was strictly there to lift weights, and he happened to be renting excuse me, he happened to be renting studio space out the back of the gym. And I was like, there's martial arts going back there. I'm going to try it out. And then after trying it out for the first day, I was like, man, this is actually pretty fun. So
Isn't that crazy that moment changed your life, but while it's happening, you never know the effect.
Never thought about it at the time. And like I was saying about the experiences, at the time, it was just me and a couple of buddies from high school going to the gym to lift weights. And it just so happened that particular day, I saw someone that was doing something that interests me. And here I am 15 years later, still pursuing that same thing.
Yeah. Do you feel... me and Cory always try to get into people's mindsets. Do you feel deserving of the success you've gotten? Because there's probably a lot of other people that did exactly what you did and never went anywhere with it. And do you
I definitely feel deserving of it. Like, it's one of those things where I hate when people say, like, oh, this person got lucky, and try to attribute, like, certain people's success to luck. Like, I've literally had a friend of mine do this to me before. It was just like, man, you're so lucky to be fighting for the UFC. I'm like, luck? Like, you know how hard it was to, like, get to the point of UFC? Like, I was a broke college student flying back and forth to Vegas. Like, I literally slept at the airport one night just because I only had enough money to buy a plane ticket and take the shuttle over to the Ultimate Fighter tryouts. Like, that's not lucky. Like there's nothing lucky about that. Luck would have been like my dad give me a credit card and said, like, oh, here you go. Like, book that flight to Vegas. Go make that dream happen, son. Like, that's luck. Like, like hard work, dedication, persistence. Like that's not luck to me. So when I do get approached, people are like, oh man, you're so lucky, or man, you don't deserve that, or whatever else. I'm like, are you kidding me? You would have gave up probably after your second try going through what I went through. Like, like I'm not gonna allow you to tell me that I'm lucky or don't deserve the platform that I have now.
Yeah. I know that for me, you know, I always wanted to be a comedian, but I meet other comedians, and you've heard them when we've done the podcast, Cory. They come in and go like, yeah, I saw a couple of open mics, and I was like, I could do that. And then they had a successful open mic, but then they realized the work after that you probably realized at first, like, being just good at martial arts has so little to do with the success. It's more the perseverance and going through the hard times and getting up when you're, were there ever times where you actually thought that you were going to quit, that you just got depressed, or you were like,
necessarily gonna quit, but certain times it was like, all right, this whole fairy tale of being a fighter thing is just kind of not paying out. I mean, I can literally remember 2013, my first day of actually being in UFC. Like at this point, I was like 1-2, and I was like, man, I'm gonna get cut. This sucks. And like,
how long? That was 2013.
Yeah,
I think were you with our team?
Yeah,
I think I remember. I think I remember you talking about that.
And was that the one where you then ran off 5 wins in a year right after that?
Yeah, 5 wins in a year, and then turned around and went 4-1 the following year.
But it's still a record that you want. So I always want. So actually, that was one of my questions on my list. Was you lost your first 2 fights in the UFC, and then all of a sudden you string off 5 victories in a row. Did something click that suddenly you were like, okay, I got to win? Like, was it mental or was it physical? It's
honestly, it was a bit of both. Like there was like that transition from moving from the Chicago to Denver, Colorado for me was a rough transition. I mean, my first 6 months being here, I lived with Nate Marquardt, and like things are okay, but at the time I was 25 years old, and I was like, all right, as much as I love Nate Marquardt, love his family, love being around here, like I'm 25. I want to be out. I want to be able to come home at like midnight, 2 a.m, and actually have some fun. So that kind of pushed me like, all right, get out and get on your own kind of thing. So that led me to move into a fighter house at a gym that I was training at the time. And it just didn't work out for me there. Like the group of guys that I was working with or living with, we just had different views of life. We had different interests. We had different everything. And I wasn't a good fit for that particular place. So that kind of led to an issue with me and some of the guys living there and me and some of the guys on the team at that time. And ultimately, the coach had to make a decision like, well, if we have 5 guys complaining about one guy, let's get rid of the one guy and keep the other 5 happy. So that ultimately ended up with me getting kicked out of that particular fighter house, kicked out of that gym, and a bunch of other things. And here I am finding myself like, well, crap, I can't necessarily go back to Nate's, can I? Like, is he going to accept me? Is he going to open the doors back up? Like, what do I do from here? So at a particular time, I had a friend who was a realtor and was like, hey, I know it might not be ideal, but I have an office that I'm trying to convert over to a residential unit. You can stay there in the meantime until this other house is complete and you and a couple guys can move into there. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm kind of desperate right now. I got kicked out of the place I was staying in. I need to find someone to go ASAP. Like, yeah, that works for me.
Yeah.
So here I am living in a freaking office trying to make it happen in the UFC. So I was like,
and this is while you were in the UFC.
Yeah, while I'm in the UFC.
Yeah, so all of your like thinking of like, oh yeah, when I get in the UFC, all of this will get better. Was it?
Yeah,
didn't change
I'm like, oh, I'm in the UFC.
That's got to be
good.
really demoralizing.
That's got to really play with your head.
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm rich. I'm in the UFC. Like, no, like it sucked. Like I was living in an office. I was waking up at 5 a.m. to go work for minimum wage.
What were you doing?
I was doing random construction jobs. I literally woke up and was like, because like at that time it was like, all right, fighting is still my priority. I still want to make it in the UFC. So like I was waking up, going to a temp agency, getting hired out for a day, just so I can get off in time and make it to training in the evening or in the afternoon. And I'm just like, it got to a point I was like, man, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm a military veteran. I have a bachelor's degree. I have all this stuff going for myself outside of fighting. But here I am living in an office, working for minimum wage, trying to make this dream of being a fighter happen. Like, am I stupid?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with
that's
me?
crazy, bro. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, it literally was points where I was just like, dude, you're dumb. Just give this whole fighting thing up and go live a normal life. Go back to the police force. Go back to, like, the military. Go back to...
Yeah, what am I doing? What am I thinking?
Yeah, so it definitely crossed my mind, and I was just like, nah, it sucks right now, but I don't want to quit. I don't want to be that guy at 7 years old for like, oh, if I were 30 years younger, I could have pulled that off. Like, I don't want to be that guy. So at the time, even though it sucked, even though it was uncomfortable, even though it was where I wanted to be, I didn't want to regret it later on. So I was like, all right, as much as it's going to suck, I'm going to try to turn it around.
That the real world is like that girl that like will answer your phone call at 2:00 in the morning, where it's like, yeah, she'll always be there if I want it to be there, Cody Donovan said one time to me, he goes, the real world is always hiring, and like that really helps me kind of get through some stuff, because I was like, I mean, I could go do that, but I could do that at any point in my life whenever I want. But
yeah, there were definitely points in my career where I was like back at a hotel room and going, what started to kill me, Neil, was I started seeing people I had gone to high school with buying houses, and I was still a waiter with this dream of being a comedian that my mom and dad both told me I was a fool for following. But I just was like, and I started feeling like I was renting for $500 an old lady's garage. That's where I was living, while my friends were buying houses because they had gotten out of school now and they were doing. And I remember going like, geez, maybe I really made the wrong decision here. I'm not going to be able. And then what's even weirder, and I wonder if you had this experience, is then I started to get successful. Me and Cory have had this talk a lot, which is when you start to get successful, that doesn't equal financial freedom, but to everybody else it does. So I would meet these girls at my show, and they'd come back to my garage under this old lady's house, and you could tell they were like, I thought you were a lot more successful than this. And I would always say, like, this is just one of my projects, because it took a while to start to actually make money with it. Even after I started to get successful, was that your experience at first?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I said, the first year in UFC, here I am still working for minimum wage trying to make this thing happen.
And you're in the UFC at the same time.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I made self-defeated fighter, I'm gonna be rich. But like, you realize like, oh, here's your check for $6,000 for being gone the last couple of months, and all your bills that you left at home are still there waiting for you.
Right.
Good luck with that. And you don't know when your next fight gonna be, so good luck with that too. So it's kind of the same thing with being a fighter. I mean, it's funny you had that kind of like that feeling like, oh, I know what that feels like. Because like I always tell people, being a fighter is not like any other professional sport where you get a huge signing bonus and you feel like you've made it once you get there. It's more like a starving artist. You're like kind of like paying your way until you kind of make it big, and that one big show may not come again for a while, or may not happen for a couple years, moments, months, whatever it may be. So it's kind of a weird way of living, not knowing where your next paycheck's going to come or if it's guaranteed or not.
Hey, so I have an interesting question that I never thought about. So like, so your first big payday, or when you guys win a big fight, do you actually get in the mail like a check like that in an envelope that says from the UFC, like in care of Dana White, and you open it up and it goes like UFC $50,000. And
you used to, now it's electronic deposit. Like my first, I remember, like I didn't even know I got it. Like I remember my first UFC fight, or one of the second ones, I got an undisclosed bonus from the UFC, and I literally had no idea it was there. I just happened to go back to Chicago to my grandma's house, and I was like, an envelope from the UFC. What can this be? And I opened it up, and it's a check for like $4,000. I'm like, no way. Yeah. Like, this is going to help a lot. Yeah. But
now it's just an email.
Yeah.
Now you just get like an email.
You guys miss out.
It's still kind of exciting, though,
it's
I guess.
Kind of exciting.
You see that it's from Zuffa, and you're like, oh, cool, this must be some money or something.
But the funny thing is, like, the email doesn't even match up with the, like, actual deposit sometimes. Like, you'll, like, get an email and say, like, oh, yeah, you got this money. And it's like, it hasn't hit my account yet, and then like 2 weeks later you get it. Or it's the opposite, where it's like, holy crap, I got some money out of nowhere. Where did it come from? And then 2 weeks later, here comes the email from UFC, like, oh, by the way, this is what that check is for, or that money was for.
And when you talk about that, going from starving artist to, and it is that sudden. And in my business, I was a starving comedian, and I was working as a waiter, and then I got something called the Montreal Comedy Festival, which I've told Cory that was the big festival to get in my business. And the next day, I had a bunch of meetings with like ABC, CBS, and whatever, and they were doing something called holding contracts back then. And what they would do is they'd give you like $150,000, and it was just to do nothing. It was just so that if they found a project for you, they owned you. And I remember I got my first check in the mail. It was $75,000. I had never made more than $300 a week as a waiter. And I had a $75,000 check. And I remember walking, it was back in the days when you'd walk into a bank, and I remember thinking, like, why is the teller not fucking me right now? Like, I just gave her a check for $75,000. I couldn't imagine that people make that kind of money, that it's not that big a deal. But when you're making $300 and all of a sudden you're like, I suddenly have a bulk sum of $75,000. I remember thinking, like, I can retire like I can live off $75,000 for the rest of my life, and kind of have actually. Come to think of it, so were there sums of money that you started seeing coming in? Was it blowing your mind at first? Because then you get used to it, and then of course you get mortgages and stuff like that, and you have expenses. But at first, when you get it, when you're a 25-year-old who's doing construction, it must blow you away, right?
Yeah, it was definitely rewarding. It was definitely like, holy crap, I just got this much money. Like, then
For
all of a
fighting,
sudden,
which is what you love doing, right?
Yeah. And all of a sudden your Hyundai Sonata, like, yeah, I think it's time to update that a bit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, some things like that start crossing
Don't
your
be
mind.
hating on the Sonata, dude.
Yeah, like that Sonata got me across the country.
Yeah.
Like, I literally drove that thing all around the country trying to take fights. So it definitely got its work out of me, or I got its work out of it. Either way.
That's really, really cool to me that you said that, because my big thing in life was I had to get a BMW because I thought that's what successful people drove. But I had a little Toyota Corolla that I drove across the country to all my gigs. And when I got my $75,000 check, I went out and bought myself a Camry or something. But I remember taking pictures of that Toyota Corolla, that old beat up Toyota Corolla, which still means more to me now than any car ever has meant.
Yeah, it's definitely a cool feeling.
Is it time to take another break?
Yeah, let's take another break.
I have a 15-minute clock inside of my head.
Yeah,
just
you
because
actually are good at
yeah,
that,
I know.
yeah.
I'm really good at it because that's how long rounds are, and that's
We
how
should
long
have
fights are.
cornermen just for this podcast
Yeah,
come in and give me
yeah.
water and stuff.
Yeah, like a 10-second clacker.
Oh, wait, before we go, that just gave me an idea. What's the stupidest thing a cornerman ever said to you? You probably can remember.
Oh, boy.
Like, yeah. Get into the mic, yeah.
No, I don't think we should put that.
I mean, do cornermen ever say stuff where you want to go in the middle of the fight? Like, come on, dude. Of course I know.
Yeah, but we're really close to all of our corners, and they're
So you
probably
can't
going to be
say.
listening to this. So,
All right, take a break.
all right, welcome back to Punchlines Podcast. Corey Sandhagen, Mitch Patel,
Mitch Fatel first. I think Mitch Fatel should go first. I am on mic one. Without a problem with that.
and Neil Magny again.
Who's awesome.
Yeah, Neil is really awesome. Yeah, so that's, I guess, something really special that we could talk about with Neil is how long he's been in the UFC and maybe some of the changes that you've seen happen throughout the years in the UFC. Have you seen any, like, industrial changes, and or maybe even in, because right now it seems, and I don't know if it's always been this way, but it seems now that it's kind of like the era of, like, who can be the better entertainer in order to bring in the most money. Have you seen like a change in that, or has it always been that way?
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift for by being more about entertainment than actual like fighting and skill set and that kind of thing. Because like I remember back in the day training where it's like, well, you can't have your first pro fight unless you're a purple belt in jiu-jitsu, or unless you're this. Like, now those standards just don't necessarily exist. It's like, all right, can you go out there and knock a guy out? Cool, get in the cage and to see it happen.
And can you talk? And can you talk?
Sure.
And
Yeah.
because me and you aren't talkers either,
Yeah.
so it puts us in a really different spot.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see guys like there's some guys in the UFC have 500 records, but they're entertaining on the mic or entertaining outside the cage. It's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll give the guy another fight, and it kind of puts in a weird position where it's like, man, do I spend more time working on entertainment value and like catch things to say, or do I spend more time in the gym? Which one's going to pay off more?
Yeah.
And sadly, or in my opinion, sadly, what it's been looking like is the guys that can like talk more are getting rewarded more. And I'm like, that's a weird transition. Like it's never been that way for me. Like even playing sports in high school, like I can remember my high school wrestling coach, like what are you doing celebrating on the mat? Like pretend like you've been there before. It's not your first win, is it? Like that's kind of like the attitude that you would get. Now it's like, oh no, if you win a fight, you have to jump on the cage, you have to do a dance, you have to call somebody out, I have to do all these things, and we're just like, no, like for like the last 15, 16 years being an athlete, like I was taught through the opposite. And now because of the trend and because of social media, because of all these other things, I'm being encouraged to act the other way. Like it's a weird transition.
So do you think that that's what it is? It's social media? Because we've talked about this a few times on the podcast, but it seems like that gives people a tangible number of followers or likes or whatever it is, that if you can get that number up, your value also goes up. But it's the same thing in comedy too, where it's like this backwards way of thinking where it's like if someone's more popular, then they must be funny or they must be a good fighter, when that's not the case. And it really puts us in an awkward spot because it's like you said, like if I acted half the way that a lot of these guys acted, either talking or after their fights, my mom would slap the shit out of me.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, like my mom would not, like that's not how I was raised, you know, like you when you're victorious, you be humble about it. And like and like now we're living in the day and age where it's like if you act in a way that's going to get you more followers, your value goes up, your paychecks go up, blah blah blah. But that's why I wanted to ask you, is because I don't know if that's just something that I've made up in my head or if that's a real thing that is actually happening.
No, it totally happens. Like, I mean, just to use an example, like you have a guy like Johnny Walker. After he knocks the guys out, the guy's in the cage dancing, he's celebrating, he's super excited.
Yeah.
Now the tables are turning. He's got knocked out by Cory Anderson. Cory Anderson is fired up. He just knocks someone out. He's super emotional. He's yelling, he's screaming, he's doing his thing. And Monday morning, he's fined $10,000 for it. So if you're
Was he really?
Yeah.
Whoa, really?
So if you're Cory Anderson, you're like, wait, what? Like, you rewarded this guy for knocking people out and like his post-fight shenanigans, but yet I kind of did the same thing, and I'm getting, and it was by the commission that fine wasn't the UFC or anything, but he celebrated after his fight in a different manner that wasn't necessarily appealing.
It's a little bit more aggressive, but still, I agree
you're
with you.
emotional.
Yeah,
you just knock someone out. You're like going into a fight where it was like, so after this guy beats you, he doesn't get a title shot. How do you feel about that? You're answering that question over and over and over again for like 6 to 8 weeks, and you go out there and you actually do what everyone thought you weren't able to do. I can see you getting pretty emotional about it, and rather than waking up Monday morning with 100,000 more followers, you wake up with a $10,000 fine. Like, how does that feel? Like, you know what I mean?
Especially when, and I can understand the emotion, especially when you've been, I mean, even I thought to myself, like, why is Johnny Walker fighting? Like, you just start to buy the hype, and I don't even know much about fighting, I remember thinking, like, Johnny Walker's going to walk over this guy. And I think that's what you start to feel is so disrespected when you're like, this guy has just become so popular, and he hasn't really done much to prove it at this point. And that's a weird feeling.
Like, but this is the day and age we live in now, dude. Like, it's all about that 10 to 60 second soundbite. Like you probably see it in comedy. You'll stay up night after night, like writing down your comedy, rehearsing in the mirror, doing everything else like that, and you go out there and try to kill it, put on a great show, and for the audience and everyone there, it is a great show, but then you'll see one guy with one catchy punchline, and he gets replayed on social media a million times, and you're just like, what the hell? Like, how did that just happen?
I was watching actually recently some interview on ESPN, and it was some guy in the NBA. I don't really know NBA players very well, but the guy was like, I'm not really going to say what you want me to say because you just want some clickbait, and then like just beast out, and I was like, hell yeah, that's awesome, you know, because it does seem like it's getting out of control, and maybe it's just because I'm jealous because I'm not like that, but I don't know, it seems like it's getting out of control.
I don't know if it's jealousy as much as there's two aspects to what we all do, which is there's an aspect of art and then there's an aspect of a show that, you know, I hate the fact that I would get excited to watch Conor McGregor fight because I don't like him as a human being. But any fight he fights in, I'm going to take off from I'm not going to work that night to watch Conor fight. And I don't like even that I've fallen into that.
I'm the same, though.
Yeah.
Are you the same?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm the same, you know?
I think she had you guys over and bought the pay-per-view for his boxing match.
Yeah.
And this
I do remember that.
And this is a guy, and one of my favorite fighters is Rose Namajunas, and I love her as just a person, and just knowing that he scared the shit out of her before a fight by throwing a thing through, and whatever, I'm like, I despise him as a human being. Of course, if he wants to come on the show, I will think of some nice things to say about
We'll just take that clip out. We'll take this little 2 minutes out.
We've learned we can edit, but I do get excited for his fights, and so there is so I know that as a comedian, that what I know is this: there are comedians who are playing arenas who are basically just mediocre comedians that because the time is right and because they put on a certain kind of show, they're going to sell out. And is it the same thing as you, Cory? Am I jealous that I'm not playing those theaters anymore? I mean, I don't know if I am or not, because I enjoy playing a 20-seat room just as much because I love my jokes, and I'm not going to turn into that. But I do get mad that people don't want their comedians now to rise to a better level.
Yeah. And you know what I found even just through meeting you and kind of like what I've realized is that like some of the best like fights and some of the best like stand-up that I've seen have been in those like I mean, they haven't been Netflix specials, you know,
right.
or they haven't been like UFC fights. They've been like I really enjoy going to amateur shows and like cornering at them because I really like to watch them, you know, because I'm like, wow, there really might be some quality here, you know, even though it's not at this very high level. But now like the very high level in quotes is like who was popular enough to get that contract, you know,
for sure.
Which is weird.
And you've told me, and I thought it was really interesting because it was the same exact parallel for me, that if you're watching a fight and someone's not technically sound or really good, you'll just turn off the fight. You can't even watch it. And for me, like, my wife will want to watch a stand-up comedian, and I see her laughing, and I realize that my wife doesn't care as much about it as I do. She just thinks it's funny, whatever the person is saying. And I have to just kind of watch with her because I don't want to take away from her that she's enjoying it, but in a weird sort of way, I'm like, but it's really bad comedy, but it's still enjoyable to her. So, I wanted to. Cory wrote LOL under this question I wanted to ask you, and I don't know if you thought I was making a joke or not, but I was being serious. Which is, I wanted to address the steroids issue because what I said to Cory was.
No, I was laughing because of the joke that you made afterwards about how you were on steroids. Or something, or maybe that's how I interpreted it.
I think I got a laugh I didn't expect.
Just the idea of someone thinking that you're on steroids made me laugh.
Oh, okay. I didn't even mean that joke, but I'll take credit for it. What I wanted to say was, so one of the things as I did research, and I said the parallel for me was, I remember one day, and this is what I want to know, how painful it is to know that you didn't do something and know that from that day on, there's always going to be a group of people that no matter what are thinking that or whatever. And the parallel I had was, I once was sitting in a hotel room and I came up with a funny Twitter joke. And the Twitter joke that I remember I just had my teeth whitened, and it was really painful. So I looked in the mirror and I thought to myself, next time I'm just going to get really tan instead of whitening my teeth. I remember thinking that to myself while I was looking in the mirror. I was like, that's a great Twitter. So I wrote that out, and all of a sudden there were like 500 people going, Mitch Hedberg, who's a comedian who had apparently written a joke 10 years ago, like instead of getting my teeth whitened, I just got really tan. And everybody just assumed that, and I've never stolen a joke in my life, and I would be horrified, but all of a sudden I was like, you're a thief, you're this, and everybody, and it was going around, and I started feeling it go out of control. And I remember feeling really, really pained by that and feeling like, how do I defend myself now? Because I'm a thief now to people, and I didn't even do anything. So
I mean, so with this whole drug test, I can call it a scandal now. This whole drug test situation that came up this year, that's exactly how it felt. I mean, here I am literally 4 days out from a fight, and it's like, hey, don't take that flight tomorrow. You're not going to fight. Like, we couldn't get this thing resolved. We couldn't get it cleared. You're not fighting this weekend. Just leave it at that. So I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, I already done my training camp. I already paid out everything leading up to that point. Like, I need to go out there and fight. What do you mean I can't fight? So having to deal with that and then having to be put with the option of like, we're not going to say what exactly happened. You're just not fighting. And I'm just like, so what does that mean to me? What do I do in that situation? And I'm like, do I lie to people? Do I tell people like, oh, I rolled my ankle, I can't fight this week, or I slipped on a banana peel? Like, do I start making up stories why I can't fight this weekend, or do I be open with people, be honest with people, let know what's going on? Right. So, of course, I was open, I was honest, and I let everyone know what's going on. It's like, all right, well, I allegedly tested positive for this banned substance, and because of that, I'm having to go through this whole process now. And I remember coming out and saying that, and immediately, like, seeing the headlines from ESPN, like, oh, Neil Magny pulled from a fight for drug test failure, and like MMA junkie and all this other stuff. I'm just like, man, that sucks. Like, that's not actually what happened, but whatever. Like, it's gonna get resolved, and my name's gonna get cleared eventually. So whatever, I'll have to go through it. And then like having to come to the gym the next day and explain to the coaches, like, hey, do you guys might be getting calls and requests for interviews about this whole drug test thing? Be open, be honest. Like, this is where it's at. This is what happened. This is what's going on. And that's as much information as I have, as much information you guys have. Like, don't feel the need to like make some story up to protect me, because I'm okay with taking the heat for it. I know I did nothing wrong. I know it's all going to get resolved eventually. So yeah, just be open, be honest. If you get a call from Hawani or whoever about an interview, like, do the interview, like, let them know what you know, and take it from there. But it did hurt and it did suck. Like,
did you lose sleep over it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Like, literally was like waking up in the night, checking my phone, like, all right, this thing is over. It's a dream. It's a nightmare. Like, it's not actually happening right now. And I'm like, oh no, this is real life. This is definitely going down. So it was definitely miserable. Still, you know what I mean? It wasn't like it was over in May. I'm still dealing with the consequences of something I did not do. So it was just a terrible feeling of being accused of something that I know for a fact I didn't do and not being able to clear my name and immediately about it. So that part was frustrating. But the cool thing at the end of the day was the people around me. I remember some of my friends saying like, "Oh man, Neil, like I can't imagine what you're going through right now, but kind of stay strong. Like this is happening to you. Imagine who else it can happen to. Like I know for a fact you did nothing wrong. I know for a fact that you're not taking any bad substances or anything like that. But take a stand. Take a stand for it. Don't sit there and let this go without a fight. Like actually stand up for yourself. Actually stand up and speak what's right, kind of thing. And sure enough, it ended up being a position where USADA, the commission, everyone was looking into their policies. Like all right, man, what's really going on here? Like from what we found, from what we're looking at, this doesn't look like cheating. From his other tests that were days apart, this definitely isn't cheating. So what is this positive sample attributed to? And it finally came down to a point where USADA and the commissions both looked at each other like, dude, we got to use some common sense here. Like all the science points to not cheating. Guys shouldn't be getting punished for it. So even though it sucked having to go through that whole thing, it was pretty cool. It was pretty rewarding to see Nate Diaz.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, because your whole experience was before that, and like. I don't think you have the same diehard fans as Nate Diaz does. Sorry if that burst your bubble, but I don't think. I don't think. Big fan. I don't think that you do. So like, because it happened to you, because of I think the quality of person that USADA knows that you are, they were able to change that rule. But like the star power that Nate has took I think a lot of credit away from USADA, but. When it happened to you, it was different because it was USADA was very like if you got popped by USADA, you were doing drugs.
Right,
you know what I mean?
Right,
like that's what everyone's thought process was. After Nate, I think it definitely changed a lot. Where it's like this guy didn't do anything.
Yeah, and then the crazy thing is like the whole thing that bothered me about this whole situation is like because of the positive test that I had or whatever, we actually went through. I had to fly to California and present to the commission about like adding thresholds for certain substances or whatever, and actually got the rules changed where no fighter, if you're below a certain picogram level or whatever it may be, for some things, it's not a positive finding. It's an abnormal finding. There's no athletic advantages to that particular guy.
Wow.
So we're not going to like throw a hammer at him and put him from a fight. It's like that's literally the rule set that like my case was able to like, and it took 5 months to make that happen. It was able to get changed for it. I did get a little frustrated when it came out because it was like Nate Diaz just bullied USADA. I'm like, are you effing kidding me? I just spent 5 months fighting to get this thing changed, and you're gonna sit there and say Nate Diaz bullied USADA overnight? Like, no, that's not what happened. Like look back and see how the policy changed. Look back and see who actually stood their ground and made that thing happen, and was like literally one of the main guys pushing for it. Like, it was a frustrating situation. Like, I had managers and other fighters reaching out to me like, hey man, I saw what you're going through. I have a guy in the same boat. Like, what is it looking like? I'm like, come forward. Come out and say something, dude. Like, there's obviously a flaw in the system here. Yeah. I can't be the only guy saying that there's something wrong here. If you guys believe that there's something that needs to be changed or needs to be adjusted, like, speak up, say something.
And what's even really more interesting is I've seen in interviews that you said you're actually a big fan of USADA and you're a big fan of the drug testing. Yeah. And in a weird sort of way, then that came back to bite you, and so it must be a really helpless feeling. Like, that's all I always think about is that as human beings, the worst feelings we have are when we're just really helpless. When I saw all those Twitter things rolling in that I was stealing, and I was like, and I felt like I was wanting to scream out to the world, like, I've never stolen, and just knowing that all of a sudden my name was associated with that by some weird thing that happened, I remember feeling for the first time like how tenuous this all is, that if one person says something, it can change, and the way people look at you. And it's almost a scary thing. And it also makes you think that you have to keep your friends and family close because they're the only ones that are really, in a situation ever going to really be with you through the toughest times.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, every live said it wasn't frustrating. I mean, like, even now, I'm still dealing with the results of something that happened in May.
Yeah. And even that you're associated with that now that you're part of a story. That's a weird thing to be a part of when it's just got to be very frustrating, I would think. So, I think we're basically. I just have some fun questions for you before we go. The most annoying thing someone says to you after a loss.
He's asking this so that he knows what to say.
No, dude, like
There's nothing. There's nothing that you can say, right?
Yeah, there's literally nothing you can say. With what bothers me the most is that one friend that you have that thinks he knows about training. He's like, oh, you should have done this, or if you would have done that. I'm like, oh, really? That easy, huh? Like, if I would have just done that one technique, the whole outcome of the fight would have been different. Like, thanks for telling me that now.
People will do that. They'll call you afterwards and say you should have done it.
Yeah,
I had to. So I went to a wedding yesterday of a high school friend, and I had 2 people come up to me and say that if I need sparring partners to fight Frankie, that they used to wrestle. And I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
I was like, are you kidding me?
I know someone who can help you out.
I was like, holy shit. But yeah, that's how stupid people are. But anyways,
it's the most ridiculous thing ever. They're just like, I think you should change weight classes. Like, when you go down to 155, I'm like, are you kidding me, dude? Like, I'm skinny, I'm at 170.
Yeah.
And I'm supposed to lose 15 pounds from where? Like, it's the most bizarre thing where people are just like,
yeah.
So any form of advice is
Do you know
just
what I
not
get?
good.
This is the most insulting thing to me. I spend hours intricately putting together my lines, trying to get jokes to work a certain way that I feel proud. And then inevitably, every show, some guy will come over to me like, I got a joke you can use. And they'll just literally tell me a joke like, all right, so there's 2 gay guys and they go into a bar. And I'm like, and as they're saying it, I have to, and I've gotten to the point now where I'll actually say like, just do me a favor and let me know where the punchline is, because I'll not know when to fake laugh. And they'll go like, no, this is really funny. And then they'll say it and be like, oh, is that where I'm supposed to laugh? And I get really insulted, but I don't let it bother me anymore because that's what they look at comedy as, that anybody could just go up and tell a joke. And I'm assuming that that's what guys, I know that when I'm sitting in the audience and when I watch a fight now, I'm guilty of this too. Like my wife, who I forced her to watch fights now, will be like, "Why doesn't he just land some elbows?" like and I'm like, "Okay, I'll make sure to tell Cory that you should land elbows because that's a good thing to do." My wife thinks you should land elbows. By the way,
I'll write that down.
Yeah. And what's the and then the final question is, what's the most annoying thing people say to you after a win?
I don't know. Like, I don't really get the annoying things after the win.
Like, I'm open to all advice after a win.
Yeah, after the win, I'm like, because like, you're always such a high at the winner. Everyone's like, oh, do this. I'm like, yeah, I got you, buddy. So you don't take it as personal when it's after a win. Where when you're in that dump after a loss, it's kind of like, just do that, huh? But it's like at the win, it's just not as it's not as personal, or it's not as you're not in that down mode.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah.
Do you guys have a second after a win where you start going like, oh, I'm gonna be interviewed, I have to say something cool now? Like, does your mind go into that?
I've felt that way. Yeah, I've recently felt that way. Where I was like, all right, I got to say something that'll be like clickbait, and then I like botched it because that's not me,
I think you should just mention our podcast after your next win. Neil, too, I think you should. I could give you $20. You could spend it on your kid, on your sister and brothers if you want. So.
Give me a whole diaper now.
I'll take care of you.
Yeah, really.
Inflation.
Thank you so much for doing this, man.
Yeah, thanks.
You were one of the guys that I said to Cory, I was like, do you think you get Neil? And he's like, he's a really good guy. So, and I'm beginning to believe him now. So that's pretty cool. And thank you so much for being on Punchlines Podcast, and this was fun, right?
Yeah, dude, this is awesome. Thanks for having me on here, man. Like, it's
who's better, me or Mitch?
I think it's pretty obvious, Cory. Why do you want to go there?
I plead the fifth.
Yeah. I'm kind of bringing him along with me because he's.
But I do think it's a tag team team. Like, you guys don't work well one or the other. Like,
we're good together.
Yeah, but I feel like if I was sitting in a room with just you and I, it would be pretty awkward. I mean, I'll be avoiding eye contact with you.
That's most people, though.
So having Cory and it kind of like changes the dynamic and makes it work. Where if it was one or the other, just wouldn't work.
I'm more the nervous. I'm the one that if we were friends in high school, I would be the one that wanted everybody to like us, and he'd be the one that'd be like, just chill when we walk into the party. Like, if people want to talk to us, they'll talk to us. And so I think it's actually a good.
I think it's good too.
Good team. All right, thanks, Neil.
Cool, no problem. Thank you, guys.
Podcast.